Formula One cars are very precisely calculated designs. Unlike road cars, there's no such thing as styling. Of course, there are rules that govern the size and total weight of the vehicle. But the whole shape of the car and some of its layout is determined by aerodynamics. It wasn't until the 1960s that designers became concerned with aerodynamics, and not until the 1970s that wind tunnels were used extensively. And aerodynamics is not concerned simply with reducing wind resistance, because designers soon discovered that you could use the airflow on top of the car to push it down going round corners, making it stick to the road better and thus corner faster. An American, Jim Hall, first tried this idea with the sports racing car, the Chaparral, in 1967, by installing a wing at the back of the car. Formula One soon stole the idea. Wings quickly appeared, little ones at the front, bigger ones at the back. Aerodynamics had arrived. But you never get something for nothing, and wings created their own problems. The bigger the wing and the more you angle it to create downforce, the greater the drag it causes. So you may be going faster through the corners because of the increased downforce, but you go slower down the straight because of the increased drag. It was in the late 70s that the brilliant English designer Colin Chapman and his Lotus team took aerodynamics a stage further. His Lotus 79 won 6 races before other teams began to use the same aerodynamic effect. Lotus used the air under the car to suck it down onto the track, giving a huge increase in cornering power, with only a small penalty in aerodynamic drag. This technique was described as ground effect. Designers had discovered a way to increase the weight of a Formula One car at high speed by more than the weight of this Rolls-Royce. This is what happens to the air under a ground effect car. From where it comes in at the front, it is carefully controlled to swoop down and through an inverted aerofoil shape. This alteration in speed automatically creates the effect of suction at the point where the air is going fastest. The faster the car goes, the more suction it develops. Let's take a look at what a modern Formula One car consists of. The Marlboro McLaren is particularly interesting, since it is the most successful Formula One car ever raced in a single season, winning 12 of the 16 events in 1984. Formula One cars don't have a chassis or frame. The front section is a stressed shell, which is made not from metal, but from a lighter and stronger material, carbon fiber. This is the section of the car with the front suspension and wheels bolted to it. It has to be totally rigid, and it's the section which carries the driver. Behind the driver is the fuel tank, and then the engine. Formula One cars not only have no separate frame, but unlike on a road car, the engine is not bolted into the car. The engine itself forms the back half of the car's structure, and the rear suspension is actually bolted onto the engine. Again, unlike on a road car, the gearbox is mounted right at the back. This not only improves weight distribution, but also means that it's very accessible for the mechanics to work on. Turbo is one of the trendy words of automobile technology in the 1980s. You can see the power the turbo produces, but how does it do it? Its principle is very simple. Usually, in a non-turbo system, as the exhaust gases leave the engine's combustion chamber, they just travel down the exhaust pipe and out into the air. But these gases are traveling pretty fast. Indeed, as the engine speeds up, they're traveling very fast. Just rev up your own road car and feel the pressure at the end of your exhaust pipe. This pressure is a kind of power, and it's normally wasted. In a turbo installation, the exhaust gases are diverted to drive a small turbine wheel. The exhaust pressure turns this wheel and then escapes back into the exhaust system on the other side of it. The small turbine wheel is connected to a compressor, which sucks in air and blows it into the combustion chamber of the engine under pressure. This means that more fuel is being pumped into the engine's combustion chamber, and the more fuel in there, the bigger the explosion, the greater the power. But every advance in design seems to carry some penalty, and the turbocharger is no exception. It has two problems. One is that it has little power at low speeds, because at low speeds, the exhaust gases are traveling slowly. So therefore, the turbine and compressor are traveling slowly. As the engine speeds up, the exhaust gases travel faster. So do the turbine and compressor. Then, the turbo is really working. But this means that there is not the instant response and wide power range of a non-turbo engine. High technology is needed to make turbo installations work. The exhaust pipes have to be made of high nickel alloys, virtually the only metal that won't melt at the heat generated and will stand the intense strain involved. Speed and heat are the enemy of the turbo. In a Formula One turbo engine, the compressor is likely to be running at up to 140,000 revolutions per minute, and the temperature at the hottest point will be 1,700 degrees Fahrenheit. If the temperature gets out of control, then the oil breaks down, the oil seals burst, and the result is fire. And fire is one of the most deadly hazards a racing driver can face. Okay, let's assume the car is set up as well as it can be, and suppose that in the race it's quick, but not actually in the lead. Then comes the real skill, overtaking another driver. These two identical Porsche 928s are ideal for a demonstration. This isn't like on the road, where you wait for an opportunity and accelerate past the car in front. Here, the guy in front doesn't want you to get past him. And two cars can be so evenly matched that over a lap they will be separated by as little as a few hundredths of a second.
Most overtaking is done on corners or when you approach them. The basic tactic is that you outbrake the other guy. If you can leave your braking just that fraction later, you may be able to get your nose in front. This is all extremely dangerous, and we have to rely on each other to give way at a certain moment. Our rule for ourselves is that when you see that the other man has braked later than you give way. If you don't, both cars may come off the road.
Of course, overtaking is very complex. What do you do, for example, when your car is faster through the corners, but has less power than another car?
Then you have to trail the car in front through the corners, and on the straight he powers away from you. Well, if you're lucky, you can use your knowledge of aerodynamics to pass him on the straight. If you get right behind him in his slipstream, there's a partial vacuum, a kind of hole in the air resistance made by his car. That means you can speed up beyond your car's normal maximum speed and maybe sneak past him. Of course, you may try to stop your opponent getting in your slipstream. But the psychological pressure on the driver in front in this situation is simply enormous. He knows that the smallest error and the man behind will slip past him.
Some drivers, on some days, can resist that pressure. On others, they can't.
You have to be ready basically for everything. Psychologically, you should never get into the areas where you don't feel well about driving or being anxious or you don't feel well. I think this is really wrong to start a race like this. So if you have to start under these conditions, you suffer so that the others will win, who are positive and quick and everything is good for them. So I think you have to try to get everything under control really before a big race. So the next time you're watching a Formula One Grand Prix at the track or on television, I hope what we have shown you will help to make the race more enjoyable.